Imagine a world still recovering from the wounds of World War I, plunged into economic crisis, political instability, and a deep sense of injustice. Millions of people were unemployed, businesses collapsed, and entire nations faced hunger. In Germany, the situation was even more extreme. Hyperinflation made money almost worthless. There are reports of people using banknotes as wallpaper or burning money to keep warm because it was cheaper than firewood. Families carry bags full of cash just to buy basic food. Trust in governments had practically disappeared, and desperation dominated society. It was in this chaotic environment that leaders capable of manipulating this collective despair began to rise. Figures like Benito Mussolini and Adolf Hitler gained prominence by promising order, stability, and national greatness. Mussolini, who was initially linked to socialism, broke with his previous ideas and began advocating extreme nationalism, based on a strong centralized state and national unity. He promised to restore the glory of the Roman Empire and bring back Italy's lost pride. In Germany, Adolf Hitler used highly emotional and persuasive speeches. He blamed minorities and external enemies for the country's crisis, especially Jews, communists, and political leaders who had accepted Germany's defeat in World War I. His simple, direct, and emotionally charged rhetoric captivated millions who were desperate for solutions. Gradually, Hitler transformed the Nazi Party into a dominant force, using mass propaganda, censorship, and violence to eliminate opposition. As these leaders consolidated their regimes, Europe watched with concern but failed to act decisively. Hitler began openly violating the Treaty of Versailles, rebuilding Germany's military, creating an air force, and heavily investing in weapons. Even so, countries like the United Kingdom and France chose to avoid direct confrontation, adopting the policy of appeasement. The idea was simple: give in to small demands to avoid a larger conflict. However, this strategy had the opposite effect. It gave Hitler time and confidence to continue expanding. Germany's expansion happened step by step. First came the annexation of Austria, known as the Anschluss, which was welcomed by much of the local population. Then Germany demanded and took control of the Sudetenland, a region of Czechoslovakia with a large ethnic German population. Shortly after, Hitler broke agreements and occupied the rest of the country. It was becoming increasingly clear that his ambitions had no limits. At the same time, Mussolini sought to expand Italian power by invading territories in Africa, such as Ethiopia, in a campaign marked by violence and even the use of chemical weapons. Meanwhile, Japan was rising as a military power in Asia, invading China and committing brutal massacres, such as the Nanjing Massacre, where hundreds of thousands of civilians were killed in horrific ways. The world was rapidly moving toward a global conflict. Alliances began to form. Germany, Italy, and Japan created what became known as the Axis powers. On the other side, the United Kingdom and France attempted to contain the situation, still cautiously. Everything changed in 1939 when Germany invaded Poland. This time, there was no room for negotiation. The United Kingdom and France declared war, officially beginning World War II. The early stages of the war were marked by a devastating and innovative strategy, blitzkrieg, or lightning war. The combination of tanks, aircraft, and fast-moving troops caught enemies completely off guard. In just weeks, entire nations were defeated. France, considered one of the strongest military powers in the world, fell quickly. The image of German troops marching through Paris symbolized the terrifying rise of Nazi power. With France defeated, the United Kingdom stood almost alone. Under the strong leadership of Winston Churchill, the British resisted months of intense German bombing campaigns known as the Blitz. London was heavily damaged, but the population endured. This moment showed the world that Germany could be resisted. Hitler then made a risky strategic decision to invade the Soviet Union. At first, German troops advanced rapidly, capturing vast territories. However, Soviet resistance was fierce, and the Russian winter became an even more deadly enemy. German soldiers, unprepared for extreme temperatures, began to suffer massive losses. The Battle of Stalingrad became a turning point, marking the beginning of Germany's downfall. Meanwhile, in the Pacific, Japan launched a surprise attack on the United States at Pearl Harbor in 1941. The attack destroyed part of the American fleet and had a massive impact. The next day, the United States entered the war, completely shifting the balance of power. With its enormous industrial capacity, the U.S. began producing weapons, vehicles, and supplies on a massive scale. The war had now become global. Battles were fought across Europe, Africa, Asia, and the oceans. One of the darkest chapters was the Holocaust, where millions of Jews and other minorities were persecuted, imprisoned, and killed in concentration camps. This genocide showed how far extremist ideologies can go when left unchecked. Gradually, the Allies began to regain territory. In 1944, D-Day marked one of the largest military operations in history, with thousands of soldiers landing on the beaches of Normandy. This event began the liberation of Western Europe and placed Germany under intense pressure. In Italy, Mussolini lost support, was overthrown, and executed. In Germany, cities were being destroyed by constant bombings, and enemy troops were advancing from all sides. In 1945, Hitler committed suicide, and Germany surrendered. Japan remained the last major power still fighting, resisting with extreme determination, and even using suicide attacks known as kamikaze missions. To avoid an invasion that could cost millions of lives, the United States made a drastic decision to use nuclear weapons. Hiroshima and Nagasaki were destroyed by atomic bombs, causing unprecedented devastation. Days later, Japan surrendered, bringing the war to an end. World War II left deep scars. More than 70 million people died, cities were destroyed, and the world was never the same again. In response, efforts were made to prevent future global conflicts, such as the creation of the United Nations. At the same time, the world entered a new period of tension, the Cold War. More than just a historical event, World War II is a powerful warning. It shows how crises, fear, extremism, and poor decisions can lead to devastating consequences. And above all, It reminds us that understanding history is essential to avoid repeating the same mistakes in the future.